I'm very honored to be here, and it's a real pleasure to speak to you today about this topic, platform trials. So yes, I'm currently an associate professor in public health at University of Bordeaux with a strong focus on clinical research, and particularly in infectious diseases and vaccinology, where I've been working for about 10 years. And the specific topic of platform trials became especially relevant for me, with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic 5 years ago. And in Bordeaux, we became involved at that time in the rapid development of a French platform trial that aimed evaluating therapeutic strategies in outpatient. And since then, we try also to build on this expertise beyond the context of infectious disease and public health emergency. And as you will see in my presentation today, we now see a growing number of platform trial projects being developed, and their scope is expanding beyond infectious disease and other therapeutic into other therapeutic areas as well. So here is a outline of my presentation. So I will start by going back to a few key definition, design, and explain why platform trials are a major interest in certain areas of clinical research. Then I will focus on the specific methodological challenges they raise, and I will also briefly present an example, the coverage France trial. So this is the trial I spoke about on the last slide. And finally, I will highlight some operational and logistical aspects regarding platform trial. So here you can see the design of traditional randomized controlled clinical trials. So at their simplest, most clinical trials are set up to see if a drug or an intervention is safe, effective for some illness or condition. So typically, this type of classical RCT is set up to answer one specific question about one single intervention. And while it's often very effective to answer the question, it's not always the most efficient way to get the overall answer. And with most trial design, all the infrastructure, the labs, people involved, staff, trial documentation, etc., is closed at the end of the study. So if researchers want to look to another intervention in the same field, then another study, another trial needs to be set up, which can be very, very time consuming. So what is a platform trial? In fact, it's a specific type of randomized controlled trial, but the specificity is that first it's done to compare multiple treatments by comparing them against a shared control arm. It's open-ended, so new intervention can be added, assessed, and removed as time goes on. And it's flexible, adaptive, so we can add interim analyses, we can update control arm, etc. And in terms of definition, it's also known as a multi-arm, multi-stage trial, MAMS trial. And globally, it's a way to do research more efficiently with fewer participants to compare many study treatments in a single disease. So the underlying question we ask ourselves in this case is here disease-oriented rather than treatment-specific in classical randomized controlled trial. So it's sometimes called also master protocol. This is because platform trial uses master protocol to evaluate the different study treatments in the same way, using the same design. But the term master protocol is a bit larger. It refers to a single overarching design developed to evaluate multiple hypotheses. And just to clarify and avoid any confusion, we have, in fact, 3 types of master protocol in clinical research. We have umbrella trial, we have basket trial, and we have the platform trial. And as you can see here, on the right, the umbrella trial is able to study multiple targeted therapies in the context of a single disease. So the allocation of the intervention depends on the characteristics of the participant, for example, the type of tumor in oncology. And the basket trial is able to study a single targeted therapy in the context of multiple disease. And for the rest of my presentation, I will focus, of course, only on a platform trial. But if you want to know more about master protocol in general, you have this very nice publication here by Woodcock and colleagues in New England Journal in 2017. So now I think it's one of the most important slides of the presentation. You can see here the design of the platform trial. So you can see that the participants are randomized between multiple interventions. For instance, here at the beginning, between intervention 1, between intervention 2, or the control arm, the standard of care. Pre-specified adaptive rules. Interim analyses are planned to allow for the discontinuation of one or more effective and ineffective intervention. And in this example, you can see that we have 2 interim analyses before the final analysis. The trial is flexible, so we can add 1 or more new intervention during the trial after the first inclusion. So here we can see that intervention 3, intervention 4 have been added during the course of the trial. And the last point is that all the trial share a common infrastructure in terms of investigation sites, CTU, clinical trial units, sponsors, laboratory, etc. And it's very important. So this type of platform trial design actually dates back to around 2004. So it's not something entirely new. It was initially developed by a clinical research group in the UK with the first application in oncology. And this is maybe the most famous example, the Stampede trial, the first platform trial that has been designed in 2004 to evaluate the different treatment strategies for men with advanced or metastatic prostate cancer. And as you can see here, the trial started in 2005, here at the beginning with 5 different investigation arms compared to arm A, which is the standard of care. And since then, the original 5 experimental arms have been closed, some in 2014, some earlier in 2012. A new one have been added as a research involved, arm G, H, KL, etc. So the trial is still ongoing today, which really illustrates the essence of a platform trial, a living, evolving study structure that adapt over time as new questions and new treatment emerge in the field. So as we just saw on the previous slide, the platform trial design first emerged in 2004, and on the figure on the left, which come from a very nice meta-epidemiological study published in Journal of Clinical Epidemiology 2 years ago, you can see the number of registered platform trials over time. And we can see in total 98 platform trials were registered between 2004 and 2022. And what is particularly striking here is a sharp increase in the number of trials since 2012. In fact, 68% of platform trials were registered after 2012. And this increase is, of course, largely explained by the COVID-19 crisis, which created a major need for efficient trial to rapidly evaluate therapeutic intervention. And today, we are in 2025, we see an expansion beyond pandemic context. There is a growing interest in other therapeutic areas, for instance, in neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, chronic inflammatory disease, and more broadly in chronic condition in general. So why conduct platform trial, and what are they becoming increasingly widely used? Because in fact, as you may understand now, this allows faster and more efficient evidence generation because we have simultaneous evaluation of multiple intervention under a single protocol, with arm can be added, removed based on the interim results without stopping the trial. So it reduces time, it reduces cost compared to sequential standalone randomized controlled trial. We have flexibility and adaptability because trial evolve as a new scientific question emerge. It allows evaluation of novel therapies, novel combination of strategy over time. Clinical and public health impact, of course, because it accelerates access to effective treatments for the patient, for the population. And this is a really good design to have a rapid response in emergency, like we have seen during the COVID-19 crisis. So it's really important to have this type of platform trial in terms of preparedness for the next pandemics. And it's a collaborative and sustainable framework. So this type of shared platform fosters long-term collaboration between academic teams, also sometimes between industry and academic team. So, of course, this type of specific design also comes with specific methodological challenges, and I will discuss some of them in the second part of my presentation. In particular, the issue around the control arm and the way comparison are made, the control of the type 1 error due to the multiplicity of statistical tests, and the management of interim analysis. So, first, let's start by the definition of the control arm. So, as any RCT, any randomized control trial, there is the principle, the ethical principle of clinical equipoise, which means that the control arm is defined as a standard of care at the time of the protocol is designed. But what makes platform trial different is that this control arm can be updated during the course of the study. It may be changed for internal reason to the trial if one of the intervention in the platform is shown to be effective during the trial, during an interim analysis or during the final analysis. Could become at that time the new control arm. It may also change for external reasons. For instance, if another trial demonstrates the efficacy of a treatment and becomes the approved standard of care in the same indication. And in such a situation, it's no longer ethical to randomize, of course, participants in the previous standard of care. So the platform trial can continue, but with an updated control arm, with a decision usually made by the trial scientific steering committee, with, of course, an amendment to the protocol, with an approval by the regulator and ethics committee. Second point is how interventions are compared in the platform trial. So comparative analysis should only be performed between each experimental arm and the common control group, and not directly between the two experimental treatment arms, excepted if there is some hypothesis and sample size calculation on that at the beginning of the trial. Comparison also must be performed using concurrent control, meaning that participants randomized to the control arm during the same calendar period as those in the experimental arm. And this is essential to limit confounding bias and maintaining the comparability between groups. And for instance, you can see on the figure, if we want to compare intervention 3 and the control arm, intervention 3 start later in the trial, so participants receiving this treatment should only be compared with the concurrent control patient who were randomized during the same period in blue in the control arm, and not with those enrolled earlier in the study. Now, an important point that often generates a lot of discussion between statisticians and methodologists during the conception of the platform trial is the control of the type 1 error. So As you may know, the alpha risk or the type 1 error refer to the probability of concluding that there is a difference between groups, between an intervention and the control arm, and therefore that an intervention is effective, when in fact it's not. And in the context of a platform trial, a key question often arises is, should we adjust for the multiplicity of tests resulting for the different comparison, intervention 3 against control arm, intervention 2 against control arm, etc. And it's important to note that this question is not raised if these 3 interventions were being evaluated separately in 3 independent 2-arm randomized control trials, as illustrated here on the left. So here you have some elements of response. The take-home message here is there is no need to adjust when hypotheses are inferentially independent, and for instance, different drugs with different mechanism of action, which is often the case for in phase 3 platform trials. So in this case, we have no extrapolation from one hypothesis to the other possible, and as seen in the previous slide, if we did separate trials, we would also not adjust for multiplicity. And another argument is in the platform trial, the shared control group leads also to a lower family-wise error rate. But of course, if we study in the different intervention, different combination of drugs, or different doses of one drug, it's another story, and we have to think about adjusting on the multiplicity of tests. Now, regarding the interim analysis, so different interim analyses with pre-specified decision rules can be set up in the protocol. 2 types, in fact, can be performed: early termination for futility, when the intervention has little or no chance of producing the desired clinical benefits, even if participants are randomized to that intervention group; or early termination for efficacy. In this case, an intervention may be declared effective before the maximum recruitment target for that intervention is reached. The requirements for that is a pre-specification of interim analysis plan and consideration of type 1 error if you are in a frequentist approach. To conservative choice of effective and statistical superiority threshold for early termination, and there is also an important role of the DSMB, the Data Safety Monitoring Board, who is mobilized to look at the unblinding data and make recommendation following the different interim analyses. And of course, the relevance must be very carefully discussed in relation to the scientific question during the conception of the trial, because the more you include interim analysis in the trial, the more we complicate the trial in terms of statistical analysis, the involvement of the different committee, scientific committee, independent monitoring committee, etc. So now I want to briefly mention a few more additional aspects. So first, regarding blinding, in fact, we can see in the review that 72% of the platform trial are open label, meaning that they are conducted without blinding. 2 reasons for that. The first one is that open label design are less resource intensive and easier to implement. And the second reason, more important, I think, it's the use of placebos can be very challenging in platform trial, as it would often require multiple matching placebo for the different intervention being tested. Second point is regarding the trial phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. So I would say that most platform trials are conducted in later phase, in pivotal phase, so phase 3 for marketing authorization of the intervention. But in fact, it's less common, but they can also be relevant in early phase study, phase 1 or phase 2, to screen multiple intervention doses or strategies before moving to a larger confirmatory phase. And last point is regarding the type of analysis, frequentist or Bayesian. We can see in the review that 66% of platform trials use a frequentist approach, but we have 40% using Bayesian approach. And when we look at Bayesian platform trials, we can see that sample size is often not predefined, and decisions to stop and continue an intervention are based on posterior probability thresholds, usually defined through simulation study at the beginning of the trial. And in the COVID-19 platform, I will show you in the next slide, the coverage trial, we see that we show the frequentist approach during the COVID-19 crisis, but more recently, we have a new project, a new platform project just funded by the Ministry of Health this year, and we decided to use a Bayesian approach, and I would say it could simplify the trial design for the conception, maybe not during the conduct, because it's a large amount of work for the statistician involved during the trial. So yes, in the next few slides, I will briefly share with you the example of this trial, Coverage France. That is a platform trial in which we were actively involved during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was a period with many platform trials were launched worldwide to evaluate the efficacy of treatment strategy against COVID-19. And in France, for instance, maybe you hear about Discovery for evaluating therapeutic strategies in hospitalized patients. And internationally, maybe you hear about Recovery trial in the UK, Principal trial, REMAP-CAP, and others, which were very famous and have significantly shaped also our understanding of COVID-19 therapeutics. So the Coverage France was a French national multi-center randomized clinical trial using a multi-arm, multi-stage adaptive designs, and was sponsored by Bordeaux University Hospital. And we were mobilized at the very beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, around the start of the first lockdown in France, with the aim of identifying effective treatment for COVID-19 outpatients who were infected but did not meet at that time criteria for hospitalization in order to prevent hospitalization and death and the overload of hospitals. So the objective of the trial was to evaluate the efficacy and tolerance of different treatments to improve the outcome in non-hospitalized COVID-19 patients with risk factor of severity. The design, as I said, was a phase 3 superiority randomized control platform trial, open label. And the participants, so the COVID-19 affected patients at risk of severe COVID, were randomized between several experimental strategies or one control strategy with a total sample size of 666 participants per arm. And there were 3 interim analyses planned for futility and early efficacy after the inclusion of 119 participants, 235, and 403 participants per arm, and the final primary analysis at the end after the recruitment of 666 participants in each arm. You can see here a theoretical view of the trial design with an example for 3 active treatment arms compared to the control arm. So the trial started with treatment 1 and 2 here in this example. You can see that treatment 2, for instance, is stopped for futility after the first interim analysis. Treatment 3 is initiated after the beginning of the trial. And some candidate treatments in the platform were studied only at certain investigator sites for logistical and organization reasons. Here you can see the details of the sample size. So the hypothesis was an experimental arm will reduce the incidence of the primary endpoint, which was the incidence of hospitalization or death, by at least 50%, with an expected incidence of 7.5% in the control arm. And these hypotheses were adjusted secondary by the DSMB during the study because there were a lot of we didn't know at the beginning very precisely what was incidence of hospitalization in France in this type of patients. And here you can see the study site that triggered the interim analysis, interim 1, 2, 3, and the principal analysis. So 100, 200, 400, and 600 participants with the objective of futility for the 3 interim analyses and also preliminary efficacy for the third one with the different one-side alpha risk and power, and all the calculation have been made using the package and state bin of Stata, which is really useful for that type of calculation. Here you can see the different scientific publications. No, not the scientific publications. It's okay. After it's the overview of the trial conduct. So in its implementation in March 2020, we have recruited 412 participants in the trial between April 2020. March, April 2020, and the end of the trial in January 2022. The trial started here in April with 4 intervention against the control arm, hydroxychloroquine, favipiravir, imatinib, and telmisartan. We can see that most of them, hydroxychloroquine, favipiravir, imatinib, were stopped at the very beginning of the trial due to negative preclinical data. And we can see that cyclizonide and interferon beta arm were added after the beginning of the trial in December 2020 and February 2021, respectively, and cyclizonide specifically was stopped for futility by the Data Safety Monitoring Board in July 2021. And here we have the publication. So if you want to know more, you have the trial protocol published in Trials, and we have also the publication of the cyclizonide arm results in CMI. So now for the last part of the presentation, I wanted to talk about a few points related to operational and logistical aspects that are very important when we want to start a platform trial. So I've selected only a few points of interest, but if you are very interested in learning more, there is this very nice publication by Love and colleagues in Trials in 2022. It's a practical guidance for running late phase platform protocol in clinical trials, and it's in fact lessons from different UK clinical trial units. So regarding the protocol, it's important to structure the protocol as a master protocol, incorporating candidate treatments in an appendix. So the protocol can easily be updated in the event of amendment to add or remove arm. We have just to change the appendix, and you can see here the example of the protocol of Coverage France. And we have in the appendix all the details regarding the different interventions, the control arms, the telmisartan, cyclizonide, etc. Second point is regarding the supervision. It's really important to have a qualified, available scientific committee and also qualified and available data safety monitoring board to make decisions quickly after and before the interim analysis and about the conduct of the trial in general. Regarding statistical aspects, it's appear important to well-define randomization stratification factor for both methodological and operational consideration. Operational consideration, for instance, when all the treatments are not studied in all the trial sites, it's important to have the trial site as a stratification factor. So often we need a smart randomization tool for quick activation and deactivation of treatment arm per site. And for the coverage France trial, for instance, we have a specific centralized system created specifically for the trial by one of the research team here in Bordeaux. Regarding the ECRF, we need simple ECRF as possible to encourage the consistency and the completeness of the data. And regarding the statistical aspect, also it's important to have in mind that this type of design requires a significant amount of statistical time compared to a traditional two-arm randomized trial. And it needs at least one senior statistician with full-time with experience in training in adaptive trial. And in this table, from the publication by Love and colleagues in trials, they compare the time of the different staff involved for a traditional trial, traditional RCT, and different platform trial, and we can see that the platform trial requires an average of 3 times or more time for statistics, but also for coordination, also for data management, etc. And it's very important to have in mind this point to anticipate the budget and the mobilization of staff for clinical trial units. So it's also important to have in mind that this type of trial is very interesting, but the advantage has also their price, and this requires an increase in planning and coordination and a large amount of work to set up this kind of trial because of organizing the coordination between stakeholders involved, to set up contract between all the different infrastructures, stakeholders, and to develop the design and all the statistical aspects regarding the specificity of the trials, randomization, etc., etc., and also the discussion with the regulator and the ethics committee. And to finish, it's also important to talk about funding and budget because it needs larger budget than traditional randomized controlled trial. And the traditional calls for project can fund this type of project, whether they are national, like the PHRC national. And I would say as a member of the PHRC national jury, we are seeing more and more this type of project, whether they are French project or international project with a French participation. MESIDOR is another call funded by INSERM, can provide also funding for methodology and infrastructure. And of course, there is an interest of European calls, which have a larger budget. And one of the challenges regarding the funding is, of course, long-term sustainability of the platform. It's not easy, and usually it needs subsequent submission and also co-funding. And another challenge also is that the financing term of the funding should be in line with the flexibility constraint of the platform trial. And it's not straightforward, for instance, with the type of funding by slice for the call for proposal from the Ministry of Health. So in conclusion, this type of platform trial are a type of randomized controlled trials that allow several intervention groups to be compared simultaneously with a single control group, with interim analysis and flexibility to discontinue or add new interventions. It's a master protocol with one protocol and one common infrastructure, enabling a broader set of objectives to be achieved more efficiently than would be possible through independent trial. We saw that it's incredibly used in various fields of medicine, not anymore in oncology or infectious disease, whereas and important to also to keep in mind that platform trial increase the complexity of planning, conducting, and generating results from a clinical research because of it needs more staff, more time, more resources than a traditional trial. So thank you. I'm done here. So I would also thank Derek, Dina, and Remy Sita, who contribute to some of the slides presented today. Of course, also coverage trial study team and participants. And thank you very much to your attention. I'm very happy to respond to any question you may have.